The glint of a rifle barrel caught the late afternoon sun as Clara Blackett stared down three men who'd cornered her at the edge of her property. Her chestnut mare, Penny, snorted nervously behind her, sensing the tension that crackled in the Wyoming air like lightning before a storm. "That's a mighty fine horse," drawled the tallest of the three, a lanky man with a pockmarked face and eyes cold as winter. "Too fine for a woman alone. We'll be taking her now." It was 1878 in the outskirts of Laramie, Wyoming territory, and Clara had spent the last year building her small ranch after her father's passing. At 22, she'd learned that being a woman alone meant fighting twice as hard for half the respect. "This horse isn't going anywhere," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. She knew what these men were: drifters, cattle rustlers who'd turned to stealing horses when ranches started branding their livestock more carefully. She'd heard stories in town. The second man, shorter but broader with a scar splitting his right eyebrow, stepped forward and reached for Penny's reins. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, miss." Clara's hand moved to the small revolver tucked in her skirt pocket, her father's last gift. But before she could draw it, the third man raised his rifle, pointing it directly at her chest. "Wouldn't do that if I were you," he said with a yellow-toothed smile. Time seemed to slow. Clara saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Penny whinnied nervously behind her. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered until they thundered close enough to shake the ground. A shot rang out, but it wasn't from the rifle aimed at her. The weapon flew from the man's hands as a bullet struck its barrel, sending it spinning into the dirt. All four of them turned to see a lone rider galloping toward them, pistol still raised, determination etched across his sun-bronzed face. "I suggest you boys reconsider your afternoon plans," the stranger called out, his deep voice carrying across the distance as he slowed his mount to a trot. The three men exchanged glances, clearly recalculating their odds. 2 against 1 wasn't bad, but the stranger's shooting spoke of experience they might not want to test. "This ain't over," the tall one muttered, but they backed away nonetheless, disappearing into the trees that bordered Clara's modest property. The rider approached cautiously, holstering his pistol as he drew near. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with dark hair peeking from beneath a well-worn hat. His eyes, a striking blue, assessed Clara with concern. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, dismounting with fluid grace that belied his size. "No," Clara said, suddenly aware of how rapidly her heart was beating. "But I would have been if you hadn't come along. I'm Clara Blackett." "Adam Whitaker," he replied, removing his hat briefly in greeting. "I was riding to Laramie when I heard the commotion." Clara studied him. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality. The gun he'd used with such precision was holstered in a worn leather belt that had seen its share of weather. He didn't have the look of a drifter or outlaw, but rather of a man with purpose. "Well, Mr. Whitaker, it seems I owe you my life and Penny's too." She patted her horse's neck, feeling the animal begin to calm under her touch. "Penny's a beautiful animal," Adam said, admiration in his voice as he approached the mare slowly, letting her catch his scent. "I can see why those men wanted her. She was my father's, bred her himself." Clara felt a twinge of grief, still fresh after a year. "These days, she's about all the family I have left." Adam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's not safe for you out here alone. Those men might come back." "Let me escort you to your home." Clara hesitated only briefly. Her father had taught her to be cautious of strangers, but he'd also taught her to recognize a genuine offer of help when it came. She nodded, taking Penny's reins and leading her toward the small cabin a quarter-mile away, Adam walking alongside on his own horse. "You're not from around here," Clara observed as they walked. It wasn't a question. "No, madam, I've been moving around since the war ended. Spent some time ranching in Colorado, did some work with the railroad, and now I'm headed to Laramie to meet an old friend who says he has a job for me." "What kind of job?" Adam smiled slightly. "Honest work, if that's what you're wondering. My friend runs a freight company." Says he needs someone who can handle trouble on the trails. Clara glanced at the pistol on his hip. Seems you're qualified. I can handle myself, he agreed without boasting, but I prefer peaceful resolutions when possible. They reached the cabin as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. It was modest but well built, with a small corral attached and a vegetable garden showing the first signs of spring growth. Clara led Penny to the corral and removed her saddle while Adam tied his own horse to the hitching post. "You've done well here," Adam commented, looking around at the neat property. "Not many could manage this alone." "I didn't have much choice," Clara replied, carrying the saddle to the small shed beside the corral. "After Pa died, I could have sold the place, but—" She trailed off, not wanting to explain to a stranger how this land, however modest, was her only connection to the family. She'd lost her mother to fever when Clara was 12, her father to a heart attack last year. Adam seemed to understand without explanation. "Some things are worth fighting for," Clara nodded, suddenly aware of how isolated she was with this stranger. Capable as he seemed, she knew nothing about him beyond what he'd told her. She straightened her shoulders. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Whitaker, but I wouldn't want to delay your journey to Laramie. It's another hour's ride and the light's fading." Adam glanced at the setting sun. "Those men could still be around. I'd feel better knowing you were safe for the night." He gestured to the small covered porch. "I'm happy to sleep out here, keep watch. Head to town in the morning." Clara considered this. The threat of the horse thieves returning was real enough, and there was something about Adam Whitaker that inspired trust despite her cautious nature. "There's a cot in the lean-to," she said finally. "You can sleep there, and I can spare some supper in exchange for your help today." Relief flickered across his face. "Much appreciated." As Clara prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and dried venison, she learned more about her unexpected guest. Adam had fought for the Union, though he spoke little of the war itself. He'd grown up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, left home at 17, and had been moving west ever since, picking up skills and trades along the way. He spoke of places she'd only heard of: the towering mountains of Colorado, the vast prairies of Kansas, the busy riverboats of the Mississippi. "What about you?" he asked as they sat at her small table. "Have you always been in Wyoming territory?" Clara nodded. "Born and raised. Pa came out here after meeting my mother in St. Louis. He was a surveyor originally, then tried his hand at ranching. Never quite succeeded at it like some, but we got by." She glanced out the window at the darkening landscape. "He always said there was nowhere on earth with skies like Wyoming." "He wasn't wrong about that," Adam agreed, following her gaze. After supper, Clara showed Adam to the lean-to where he could sleep. It was a simple structure attached to the main cabin, used for storage and occasional shelter when bad weather struck while working outside. The cot was narrow but clean, and Clara provided a lantern and extra blanket against the night chill. "Thank you for your hospitality," Adam said, "and for trusting a stranger." "You saved my life," Clara replied simply. "That makes you something more than a stranger, Mr. Whitaker." "Adam," he corrected gently. "If I'm sleeping on your property, we might as well use first names," Clara smiled. "Very well. Good night, Adam. Good night, Clara." She slept fitfully that night, her dreams filled with the image of rifle barrels and the thunder of hooves. Once she woke suddenly, certain she'd heard something outside. Peering through the window, she saw Adam standing on the edge of her property, scanning the darkness, his silhouette outlined against the starlit sky. The sight reassured her, and she returned to sleep more peacefully than before. Morning came with the gentle sounds of someone moving around outside. Clara dressed quickly and found Adam already awake, tending to both their horses and repairing a loose board on her corral that she'd been meaning to fix. "Hope you don't mind," he said when he saw her. "Thought I'd make myself useful before heading to town." "Not at all." Clara was touched by the gesture. "Let me make you breakfast before you go." Over a meal of flapjacks and coffee, Clara found herself reluctant to see Adam leave. It had been a long time since she'd had company, longer still since that company had been someone who asked nothing of her except conversation. "If you're still in Laramie in a few days, I'll be coming to town for supplies," she found herself saying. "Perhaps we'll cross paths." Adam's smile brightened his serious face. "I'd like that." After breakfast, he saddled his horse and prepared to leave. Standing in her dooryard, Clara felt an unexpected shyness come over her. "Thank you again," she said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. Just glad I was there." Adam adjusted his hat, hesitating as if there was more he wanted to say. Finally, he simply nodded. "Take care of yourself, Clara Blackett, and Penny too." She watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the vast Wyoming landscape, until he disappeared over the ridge that separated her homestead from the main trail to Laramie. Only then did she turn back to her chores, wondering if their paths would indeed cross again. 3 days passed before Clara needed to go into town. She hitched her wagon to Penny and loaded it with the few items she had to trade: some early vegetables from her garden, a quilt she'd finished over the winter, and 3 rabbits she'd snared the previous day. The journey to Laramie took nearly 2 hours, and she found herself scanning the trail frequently, though whether for danger or for a certain blue-eyed stranger, she couldn't quite admit. Laramie was bustling when she arrived. The railroad had brought growth and prosperity to the town, and the streets were busy with a mix of longtime residents, railroad workers, and the usual assortment of drifters and fortune seekers that populated any western settlement. Clara conducted her business efficiently, trading her goods for flour, coffee, sugar, and ammunition for her small revolver. She was loading her purchases into the wagon when a familiar voice called her name. "Clara." She turned to find Adam approaching, his face lighting with recognition. He looked different in town clothes: a clean shirt and vest, his hat less trail-worn, but his smile was the same. "I hoped I'd see you," he said, reaching her wagon. "How have you been?" "Well enough," Clara replied, surprised by how pleased she felt at seeing him again. "No more unwelcome visitors." "Glad to hear it," he gestured to her loaded wagon. "Finished with your trading?" "Just about. I was thinking of having a meal before heading back." She hesitated, then added, "Would you care to join me?" They ate at the small restaurant attached to the hotel, where Adam told her about the job he'd secured with his friend's freight company. "I'll be managing security for the wagons running between here and Cheyenne," he explained, "ensuring the cargo arrives safely." "Sounds dangerous," Clara commented. "Can be," he admitted, "but most trouble can be avoided with proper precautions, and the pay is good." "So you'll be staying in Laramie," Adam nodded. "For the foreseeable future. My friends set me up with a room above the freight office for now." Clara was surprised by the relief she felt knowing he wouldn't be moving on immediately. "Well, the territory could use more men like you." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from the changing weather to the latest news from the East. Adam was well-read despite his transient lifestyle, and Clara found herself engaged in a more stimulating discussion than she'd had in months. As they finished their meal, Adam seemed to come to a decision. "Clara, I'd like to ride out and check on you occasionally if you'd permit it. Those men who tried to steal Penny men like that don't give up easily. They might come back." Clara's first instinct was to assert her independence, to insist she could take care of herself. But the memory of how close she'd come to losing everything, perhaps even her life, was still fresh. "I'd appreciate that," she said instead, "though I wouldn't want to impose on your time." "It's no imposition," Adam assured her. "My work will take me in that direction regularly anyway." And so began a pattern that would continue through the spring and into early summer. Every week or so, Adam would ride out to Clara's homestead, ostensibly to check on her safety. Sometimes he brought small gifts from town: a book he thought she might enjoy, seeds for her garden, once even a new bridle for Penny when he noticed hers was wearing thin. In return, Clara would offer him meals, conversation, and occasionally help with tasks around her property. Together they repaired her roof before the spring rains, expanded her garden, and reinforced her corral. With each visit, the initial awkwardness between them dissolved further, replaced by a comfortable companionship neither had expected to find. June brought warmer weather and the first real test of their growing friendship. Adam arrived one afternoon to find Clara struggling with her well, which had begun to run dry in the summer heat. "The water levels dropped," she explained, wiping sweat from her brow. "I've been trying to dig it deeper, but it's slow going alone." Without hesitation, Adam removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves. "Show me what needs doing." They worked together until sunset, taking turns digging in the close confines of the well. By day's end, they had reached a new water source, ensuring Clara's homestead would survive the summer. As they sat on her porch that evening, exhausted but satisfied, Clara studied Adam's profile in the fading light. "You've been a good friend to me, Adam Whitaker." He turned to her, something unspoken in his eyes. "Is that what we are, friends?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had dared acknowledge. Clara felt her heart quicken. "What would you call it?" she asked softly. Instead of answering with words, Adam reached out and gently took her hand in his. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "I'd call it a beginning," he finally said. The following weeks brought a shift in their relationship. Adam's visits became more frequent, and the reasons for them less about security and more about the simple pleasure of each other's company. They spoke more openly about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Clara learned about the nightmares that still plagued Adam from his time in the war, the family back east he rarely saw, the restlessness that had driven him across the country. In turn, she shared her loneliness since her father's death, her determination to keep his dream alive, her uncertainty about the future. July brought Independence Day celebrations in Laramie, and Adam insisted on escorting Clara to town for the festivities. "Everyone will be there," he said. "It'll be the biggest celebration the territory's seen," Clara hesitated. "I haven't been to a social gathering since Pa died." "All the more reason to go," Adam urged. "You've been alone too long, Clara." She agreed reluctantly, but as the day approached, she found herself looking forward to it more than she'd expected. She spent an entire evening washing and pressing her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and even took extra care with her hair, arranging it in a style she'd seen in a magazine from back east. When Adam arrived to escort her to town, the appreciation in his eyes made all the effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The celebration in Laramie was everything Adam had promised. The town square was decorated with flags and bunting. A band played patriotic tunes, and tables groaned under the weight of food brought by families from miles around. Children ran laughing through the crowds, sparklers lighting up their faces in the gathering dusk. Clara found herself introduced to dozens of people, Adam's employer and colleagues, local merchants, ranchers, and their families. For the first time since arriving in Laramie, she felt like part of the community rather than an outsider. As night fell, the band struck up a waltz and couples moved to the cleared space in the center of the square. Adam turned to Clara, a question in his eyes. "I'm not much of a dancer," she admitted. "Neither am I," he replied with a smile. "We can be terrible together." And so they danced, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as they found their rhythm together. Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed so freely, her earlier self-consciousness forgotten in the joy of the moment. As the music slowed, Adam drew her closer, their faces inches apart. The world around them seemed to fade away, the noise of the celebration dimming until all Clara could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. "Clara," Adam said softly, his eyes never leaving hers, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, honest and unadorned. Clara felt as though she stood on the edge of a precipice, terrified and exhilarated all at once. "I think I've already fallen," she whispered back. Their first kiss was gentle, A question and an answer all at once, witnessed only by the stars overhead and the flickering light of the town's celebration. The journey home that night was quiet, both of them wrapped in the newness of what had happened between them. Adam saw Clara safely to her door, kissing her once more before reluctantly returning to town. "I'll come tomorrow," he promised. Clara fell asleep that night with the memory of his kiss still warm on her lips, a happiness she'd long thought impossible blooming in her chest. True to his word, Adam returned the next day and nearly every day after that for the next 2 weeks. Their relationship deepened rapidly, the foundation of friendship they'd built supporting the growing feelings between them. It was during one of these visits that their newfound happiness faced its first real threat. They were returning from a ride across Clara's property, discussing improvements she hoped to make, when they spotted 3 riders approaching from the direction of town. Adam tensed immediately, one hand moving to his pistol. "Clara, go inside." "What is it?" "Those men, I recognize them. They're the ones who tried to steal Penny." Clara squinted against the sun. Sure enough, the approaching riders were the same 3 who had confronted her months earlier. "What do they want?" "Nothing good." Adam's expression was grim. "Please go inside and get your father's revolver. I'll deal with them." "This is my home, Adam. I won't hide." He looked as though he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The riders were close enough now that Clara could see the smirk on the tall one's face. "Well, well," he called as they approached. "Ain't this cozy, the lady and her guardian?" Adam stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara. "You're trespassing. I suggest you leave." The man with the scar laughed. "Actually, we came to settle a debt. You cost us a fine horse and made us look like fools. We don't take kindly to either." "You tried to rob and possibly kill an innocent woman," Adam replied, his voice level despite the tension evident in his stance. "You're lucky all you lost was face." The third man, the one who had aimed his rifle at Clara months ago, spat on the ground. "Not so lucky now, are you? 3 against 1. 2, Clara corrected, stepping up beside Adam with her father's revolver now in hand. "And I'm a better shot than I look." The standoff stretched taut between them, seconds ticking by like hours. Clara could feel her heart pounding but kept her hand steady on her weapon. "You really want to die over a horse?" Adam asked quietly. "Maybe it ain't about the horse anymore," the tall one replied. "Maybe it's about respect." "Respect is earned," Adam said, "not taken at gunpoint." The leader's eyes narrowed. For a moment Clara was certain he would draw, then surprisingly he laughed. "You got nerve, I'll give you that." He looked between Adam and Clara, something calculating in his gaze. "Tell you what. We'll go for now, but this territory's getting too small for all of us. Might be time you considered moving on." "This is my home," Clara said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere," the man shrugged. "Then I reckon we'll be seeing each other again." With that, the 3 turned their horses and rode away, leaving Clara and Adam standing in the yard, weapons still at the ready. "They'll be back," Adam said grimly as the riders disappeared from view. Clara nodded, the brief confrontation having driven home how vulnerable she truly was. "What do we do?" Adam holstered his pistol and turned to her, his expression resolute. "We prepare." The next few days were spent reinforcing Clara's homestead. Adam brought supplies from town, additional ammunition, sturdier locks for her doors and windows, even materials to build a better hitching post where Penny could be secured at night. Clara's neighbors, a family who lived 2 miles west and with whom she'd had only occasional contact, agreed to keep watch for the 3 riders and send word if they were spotted. Despite the threat hanging over them, Clara found herself drawing closer to Adam. The shared danger seemed to accelerate the feelings growing between them, making each moment together more precious. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink, Adam took her hand. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," Clara teased gently. He smiled. "I've never stayed in one place very long, not since the war. Always thought I needed to keep moving, and now I find myself wanting to put down roots." He turned to face her fully. Clara, I know this is sudden, and there's this threat hanging over us, but life's too uncertain to waste time when you're sure of something. Clara's breath caught as Adam slid from the porch seat to one knee before her. I don't have a ring yet, he said, still holding her hand in his. But I have my heart, and it's yours if you want it. Clara Blackett, will you marry me? Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. She'd never imagined finding love again after losing her family, had resigned herself to a life of independence but also loneliness. Yet here was this man, this unexpected gift who had ridden into her life and changed everything. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly. Yes, Adam Whitaker, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he rose and pulled her into his arms, sealing their promise with a kiss that spoke of all the tomorrows they hoped to share. The engagement brought a new sense of purpose to both of them. They agreed to a September wedding, giving them time to prepare and, hopefully, resolve the threat posed by the three riders. Adam began dividing his time between his work in Laramie and helping Clara expand her small ranch, with an eye toward making it their permanent home. August brought sweltering heat, and the news that the riders who had threatened them had been seen in the area, moving between Laramie and the nearby settlements. Adam increased his vigilance, sometimes staying overnight at Clara's homestead, despite the raised eyebrows this caused in town. Clara's reputation mattered to both of them, but her safety mattered more. It was during one such overnight stay that disaster struck. Clara woke to the smell of smoke and Adam's urgent voice. Clara, get up, the barn's on fire. She scrambled from bed, grabbing her shawl as she followed Adam outside. The night sky was illuminated by flames engulfing the small barn where she kept Penny and her supplies. The heat was intense even from a distance, the crackling of the fire punctuated by Penny's terrified whinnies. Penny. Clara started toward the barn, but Adam held her back. It's too dangerous. I'll get her. Before Clara could protest, Adam was running toward the burning structure, covering his face with his arm against the heat and smoke. Clara watched in horror as he disappeared into the flames. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The roof of the barn began to collapse, sending sparks shooting into the night sky. Just as Clara was certain she had lost both her horse and the man she loved, Adam emerged from the smoke, leading a panicked Penny by her halter. Clara rushed to them, taking Penny's lead as Adam collapsed to his knees, coughing violently from the smoke he'd inhaled. Are you hurt? She asked frantically, kneeling beside him. He shook his head, still coughing. Just smoke. Together they moved away from the burning barn, leading Penny to the corral where she would be safe. There was nothing they could do to save the structure. Without a nearby water source substantial enough to fight the fire, they could only watch as it burned itself out. As the adrenaline of the moment faded, anger replaced fear in Clara's heart. It was them, wasn't it? She asked, her voice hard. Those men. Adam nodded grimly. Had to be. This wasn't an accident. They could have killed Penny. They could have killed you. Tears of fury and delayed shock spilled down Clara's cheeks. Adam pulled her into his arms, his shirt smelling of smoke and his heart beating rapidly against her ear. But they didn't. We're all safe. What do they want from us? Clara whispered against his chest. To scare us, to drive us away. Adam's voice was steady despite his near brush with death. But we won't let them. By morning, the barn was a smoldering ruin. Most of Clara's stored hay and feed was lost, along with tools and tack that would be expensive to replace. Adam insisted on riding into Laramie immediately, both to report the arson to the sheriff and to bring back supplies they would need. I don't want to leave you alone, he said, concern evident in his eyes. I'll be fine, Clara assured him, though she felt far from it. They've made their point for now. They won't come back so soon. Adam was reluctant but agreed, promising to return before nightfall. As she watched him ride away, Clara felt a cold determination settle in her chest. This was her home, her life, and she would not be driven from it by threats or violence. She spent the day salvaging what she could from the burned barn and comforting Penny, who remained skittish after her ordeal. By mid-afternoon, she had cleared enough of the debris to assess the full extent of the damage. It was considerable but not insurmountable. The barn could be rebuilt, the supplies replaced. What couldn't be replaced was her sense of security, now shattered as thoroughly as the charred beams that had once supported the barn's roof. True to his word, Adam returned before sunset, accompanied by the Laramie sheriff and a wagon loaded with supplies. Sheriff James Donovan was a grizzled man with a no-nonsense approach that Clara appreciated immediately. "Mr. Whitaker tells me you've had trouble with some horse thieves," he said after introducing himself. Clara explained the situation, from the initial attempt to steal Penny to the recent threats and now the fire. "Sounds like the Harker brothers and their cousin," the sheriff said thoughtfully. "Been causing trouble all through the territory. Steal a horse here, rob a stagecoach there. Nothing big enough to bring a serious posse after them, but enough to be a nuisance." "This is more than a nuisance," Adam said tightly. "They could have killed someone." "Agreed," Sheriff Donovan replied, "which is why I've sent wires to the sheriffs in Cheyenne and Rock Springs. We'll get the word out, set up a proper watch. In the meantime," he turned to Clara, "I'd advise you to consider staying in town until these men are apprehended." Clara shook her head firmly. "This is my home, Sheriff. I won't be driven from it." The sheriff looked as though he wanted to argue but instead nodded respectfully. "Then at least accept some help. I can spare a deputy to keep an eye on the place for a few days." "That won't be necessary," Adam interjected. "I'll be staying here." The sheriff raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on the propriety of such an arrangement. "As you wish. Just be careful, both of you. Men like the Harkers don't give up easily." After the sheriff departed, Adam and Clara unloaded the supplies he'd brought, enough food to last a week, ammunition, basic tools to begin rebuilding, and even a canvas tarp large enough to create a temporary shelter for Penny. As they worked together to set up the makeshift stable, Clara finally asked the question that had been on her mind since the fire. "Adam, what if they don't stop? What if we can never feel safe here?" Adam paused in his work, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "Then we adapt. We could move closer to town or even to Cheyenne where my company's expanding, but that's a last resort." He looked around at the land Clara had fought so hard to maintain. "This is your home, Clara, our home soon. I won't let anyone take that from us without a fight." His determination strengthened her resolve. That night, as they sat by the small fire outside her cabin, plans for the new barn spread between them, Clara felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The threat hadn't diminished, but neither had her determination to build a life with Adam on this land that meant so much to her. The next few days passed in a tense vigil. Adam divided his time between helping Clara with the necessary repairs to her homestead and riding the perimeter of her property, watching for any sign of the Harker brothers. Clara herself kept her father's revolver within reach at all times, even as she continued her daily chores and began preparations for their upcoming wedding. Word came from Sheriff Donovan that the Harkers had been spotted near Cheyenne, apparently having moved on to seek easier targets. The news brought some relief, but neither Clara nor Adam fully relaxed their vigilance. As September approached, the immediate threat seemed to recede. Work on the new barn progressed steadily, with neighbors from miles around coming to help, the frontier tradition of barn raising bringing the scattered community together. Clara was touched by the support, many of these people being individuals she had only nodded to in town before. "See," Adam said as they watched a dozen men raise the frame of the new structure. "You're not alone out here anymore." The wedding was set for the third Saturday in September, to be held in the small church in Laramie. Clara found herself caught up in preparations, sewing a new dress with fabric Adam had brought from town, baking with the wives of neighboring ranchers who had taken her under their wing, and putting the finishing touches on the cabin that would soon be a home for two. A week before the wedding, Adam arrived with unexpected news. The railroad's offering a reward for information leading to the capture of the Harkers, he told her. Seems they robbed a payroll shipment near Cheyenne, $500. That's a fortune, Clara said, surprised. Enough to tempt even their friends to turn them in, Adam agreed. Sheriff Donovan thinks it's just a matter of time before someone takes the reward. The news should have been reassuring, but something about it left Clara uneasy. Men like the Harkers, cornered and desperate, were even more dangerous than before. Her unease proved prophetic. 2 days before the wedding, as Clara was hanging laundry in the yard, she heard the now familiar sound of approaching riders. Her heart sank as she recognized the 3 men who had caused so much trouble. This time, they made no pretense of civility. The tall one, whom Clara now knew was Elias Harker, dismounted with his gun already drawn. "Where's your protector now, Miss Blackett?" he asked, a dangerous edge to his voice. "What do you want?" Clara asked, though she already knew the answer. They wanted Penny, they wanted revenge, and most of all, they wanted to hurt Adam through her. "We're leaving the territory," Elias said. "Need fresh horses for the journey." "That mare of yours will do nicely, and maybe some supplies for the trail." Clara stood her ground, though fear coursed through her. Adam had ridden into town that morning to finalize arrangements for the wedding. He wouldn't be back for hours. "Take what you need from the storeroom," she said, playing for time. "But leave Penny. She's the only thing I have left of my father's." Elias laughed unpleasantly. "Not in a position to negotiate, are you? Boys, get the horse. I'll deal with Miss Blackett." As his brother and cousin moved toward the corral where Penny grazed, Clara made a decision. She couldn't stop all 3 of them, but she wouldn't let them take Penny without a fight. Her father's revolver was inside the cabin, just steps away. "I need to get the key to the storeroom," she said, backing toward the cabin door. Elias narrowed his eyes suspiciously but nodded. "Make it quick." Inside, Clara grabbed the revolver from its place by the door and checked that it was loaded. Her hands were surprisingly steady as she stepped back outside, the weapon concealed in the folds of her skirt. Elias was closer now, his own gun hanging loosely at his side as he watched his companions attempting to corner Penny in the corral. The mare was giving them trouble, evading their attempts to catch her. "Hurry up with that key," Elias called impatiently. Clara took a deep breath and brought out the revolver, pointing it directly at him. "Leave now, or I'll shoot." Elias turned, surprise quickly replaced by anger when he saw the weapon. "You don't have the nerve, lady. Try me," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "This is my home. You've threatened it, burned part of it down, and terrorized me for months. I've had enough." For a moment she thought he might back down, then his face hardened and his hand moved toward his own gun. "I wouldn't," came a familiar voice from behind Elias. Clara's heart leapt as she saw Adam approaching from the direction of the trail, his own weapon drawn. He must have returned early, perhaps sensing the danger that had been hovering over them for too long. Elias froze, caught between Clara's revolver and Adam's pistol. His companions, noticing the standoff, abandoned their attempts to catch Penny and drew their own weapons. "3 against 2, the scarred brother called. "Still not good odds for you." "4 against 3, came another voice as Sheriff Donovan emerged from the trees that bordered Clara's property, rifle at the ready. "And I've got 5 deputies surrounding the place. It's over, Harker." The tension in the air was palpable as Elias weighed his options. Clara could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, the chance of escape against the certainty of prison if they surrendered, or worse if they fought. "Drop your weapons," the sheriff ordered. "Now." For one terrible moment, Clara thought Elias would choose to fight. Then, slowly, he lowered his gun to the ground. His companions, after a hesitation, followed suit. As the sheriff's deputies emerged from their hiding places to take the Harkers into custody, Adam crossed quickly to Clara's side. "Are you hurt?" he asked, concern etched in every line of his face. Clara shook her head, the revolver suddenly heavy in her hand. Adam gently took it from her, securing it before pulling her into a tight embrace. "How did you know?" she asked against his chest. One of the hands at the livery stable overheard them planning, Adam explained. He got word to me and I found the sheriff immediately. We rode hard to get here in time. Clara closed her eyes, the full weight of what had nearly happened hitting her all at once. They wanted Penny. They wanted revenge. They won't bother us again, Adam assured her. The railroad robbery carries a heavy sentence. They'll be behind bars for years, if not longer. As the sheriff's men led the Harkers away, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she could look to the future without the shadow of their threats hanging over her. Sheriff Donovan approached them, his weathered face showing satisfaction at the capture. Seems you two have had more than your share of trouble, but it's over now. Thank you, Sheriff, Clara said sincerely. Don't thank me too much, the sheriff replied with a slight smile. According to the reward notice, the $500 goes to whoever provided information leading to their capture. That'd be you and Mr. Whitaker here. Adam looked stunned. The reward? But we didn't. You stood your ground, gave us time to get into position, the sheriff interrupted. Close enough for me. I'll have the paperwork ready when you come to town. Consider it an early wedding present. After the sheriff and his deputies had departed with their prisoners, Clara and Adam stood in the yard, the enormity of the day's events slowly sinking in. $500, Clara said wonderingly. We could do so much with that. Finish the barn properly, buy more stock. Or we could take a proper honeymoon, Adam suggested. Denver, maybe even San Francisco. Clara smiled, leaning into his embrace. We have time to decide. We have all the time in the world now. 2 days later, they were married in the small church in Laramie. Clara wore her new dress of cream-colored cotton with lace she'd carefully salvaged from her mother's wedding gown. Adam, in a new suit that made him look both distinguished and slightly uncomfortable, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. The church was full not just with Adam's colleagues and the few distant relatives who had managed to attend, but with neighbors and townspeople who had come to witness the union of two people whose story of courage and determination had spread throughout the territory. As they exchanged their vows, Clara felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter, a desperate moment when a lone rider had appeared just in time to stop a potential tragedy, had led to this moment of promise and hope. The celebration afterward was held at the town's largest restaurant, with music and dancing lasting well into the night. As Clara and Adam took their first dance as husband and wife, she couldn't help but remember their dance on Independence Day, when they had first acknowledged the feelings growing between them. Happy? Adam asked softly as they moved together to the music. Happier than I ever thought possible, Clara replied honestly. And you? I spent years wandering, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home, Adam said, his blue eyes holding hers. Now I know why. I was looking for you all along. Their honeymoon was a 2-week journey to Denver, made possible by the reward money and Adam's employer's insistence that he take the time off. For Clara, who had never traveled beyond Wyoming territory, the city was a revelation. The bustle of people, the elegant hotels, the theaters and restaurants unlike anything she had experienced. But as wonderful as Denver was, both of them were eager to return home by the end's end. Their property, now truly theirs together, was waiting, along with all the plans they had made for its future. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The new barn was completed before the first snow fell, sturdier and larger than the one that had burned. With the remainder of the reward money, they purchased additional livestock, a small herd of cattle, to supplement the income from Adam's work with the freight company. Clara's garden expanded into a proper farm that supplied not only their needs, but produced enough to sell in town. Adam built a proper stable for Penny and the 2 additional horses they acquired, including a spirited colt born to Penny in their 2nd year of marriage. Their family grew as well. A daughter, Elizabeth, arrived in the spring of their 2nd year together, followed by a son, James, 18 months later. The cabin that had once seemed so empty to Clara now rang with children's laughter and the comfortable sounds of family life. As the territory moved toward statehood, their little ranch flourished along with it. Adam eventually left the freight company to work their land full-time, the operation having grown enough to support them comfortably. They added rooms to the cabin as their family expanded, transforming it into a proper ranch house that could be seen from miles away across the Wyoming plains. Penny lived to a respectable old age, pampered and beloved, eventually joined by a small herd of horses that became known throughout the county for their quality and temperament. Clara often thought of how close she had come to losing her that day when 3 desperate men had tried to steal her, and how that moment of danger had brought Adam into her life. On their 10th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard where once they had faced down armed men, Clara took Adam's hand. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked, "if you hadn't happened to be riding by that day?" Adam smiled, the years having added a few lines to his face but none to his spirit. "I don't believe in happens, Clara. I was meant to find you. Everything that came after the good and the bad, it was all part of building this life together." Clara leaned against his shoulder, watching the sun set over the land that had challenged her, threatened her, and ultimately rewarded her perseverance with a life fuller than she had ever imagined possible. "Then I'm grateful," she said softly, "for every moment of it, even the scary ones." Adam pressed a kiss to her temple. "Especially those, they taught us what we were fighting for." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, surrounded by the sounds of their ranch horses nickering in the stable, cattle lowing in the distance, their children's voices as they were called in for supper. This was the legacy they had built together, a home and a family born from a moment of courage when a cowboy had ridden in fast enough to stop a shot and change the course of 2 lives forever.